Today's video is why incest should be legal, and not only legal, but a tolerated behavior.
No, you social justice warriors have gone too far.
Now look, I get it. Whenever somebody says to legalize this or that sexual preference, the first thing that pops into somebody's brain is themselves engaging in the act. Yeah, no, I'm not into incest, but that doesn't mean it should be illegal. Now, I don't think a lot of people realize how serious of an offense incest is, but it's a lot more serious to commit fully consenting recreational incest between adults than it is to torture children in a dungeon for years.
All right, so let's look at some of these cases. Two mentally challenged adults. Again, this is mentally challenged adults had totally consenting incest, and the man was charged with 30 months in prison. The man was the father. So this is Regina versus Brown, 1992, Newfoundland Court of Appeals. This mother got 24 months in prison. So she locked her 6-year-old daughter up and started starving her just hours away from death. She would beat her each day until she got too exhausted to hit her daughter anymore. One of the beatings was so brutal, the 6-year-old lost an eyeball. And the daughter also had to get multiple plastic surgeries.
Now, whenever you have a stupid law, what people are going to do is they're going to invent smarter rationalizations to defend the stupid laws. The laws really just come down to, I find it gross because that's the way I was raised and therefore it should be illegal. That's going to be the actual rationalization for why it's illegal. So for example, people are going to say these laws exist to prevent grooming. And what is grooming exactly? Grooming is when an adult psychologically conditions a child so that the moment it becomes legal to have sex with them, they have sex. And this rationalization doesn't make sense because you legally can have sex with your kids if they're adopted. You can still have sex with your adopted kids as long as they're above the age of consent, even if they've been groomed to have sex. Another common rationalization people are going to give is that these laws exist because if you have kids through incest, then you can produce genetic defects. But this obviously isn't the reason the law exists, because if this were the case, it would simply just be illegal to have incestuously produced children. You can't have homosexual incest legally, even though that can't produce a kid. You can't have lesbian incest. You can't have incest with birth control.
Now, let's look at another case of incest here. This is Regina versus RPF, 1996, Nova Scotia Court of Appeals. Now, the judge, to defend the incest laws, his rationale is the ancient Romans and Hebrews knew that incest was wrong, and this is why it should be illegal. This is a lot more in line with why the laws actually exist than the rationalizations people are going to give for why the laws exist. In this case, a mother had consenting recreational incest with her above age of consent sons, and she got a 24-month sentence. So just compare that to the mother who tortured her daughter nearly to death, right? Like, which is the worst mother of these two? It's not a hard call in my view.
Now, there is real risks to incest, and the largest is probably genetically deficient children. And I'd like to point out two things. The first thing is, what is the probability of a child having a genetic defect, and how severe are the defects? This is the expected risk, and you can calculate the expected risk of different activities. If it's illegal to have a kid for this reason, then it should also be illegal to have a kid for something like if you have cancer genes, if you have genes that predispose a kid to cancer, if you have genes that predispose a kid to diabetes, you have to calculate the expected risk value of all these other diseases and come up with a line where you say this is an acceptable level of risk. All sexual preferences do have risks, and if the risks can just be avoided entirely, then there's no issue. Like if you're going to argue that it's bad to be homosexual because of an AIDS risk, well, can you avoid the AIDS risk? Yes, clearly. Now, one of the weird things about the LGBT community is they don't support incest offenders. And This is because I think there's this like weird divide between big city sexual preferences and then like conservative rural sexual preferences, and generally people associate incest more with like some redneck conservative sort of thing.
Some folk will never eat a skunk, but then again some folk will, like Cletus the slack-jawed yokel.
That's an important stereotype to get out of your head. All sorts of people do this, whether they're educated or ignorant or metropolitan or rural or whatever, right? Now, the sad thing is, with 100 years of political activism, all this protesting, and millions of people wasting all their talent and life just to overturn one stupid law so they can have basic human rights, the government will have already passed 16,000 more laws. What do you think? Do you think incest should be legalized? Is this video convincing? Leave your thoughts in the comments below and take a side. Give a yes or no.